a sound or you'll wake them in the deepest part of the ancient forest. The flickering candlelight illuminates the faded pages of a story. Hedgehog still sits and tells the stories that people dare not tell before.
The Witch of the Salt-Stung Shore. In a land gripped between a brooding, iron-grey sea and the jagged teeth of the whisperwood, there was a village that had forgotten the taste of sunlight. The sky was a permanent shroud of bruised clouds, and the wind did not sing but hissed through the salt-crusted thatch of the roofs. The people of Greyhaven were a dour, suspicious lot, their hearts as shriveled as the seaweed that littered their stony beach. Their lives were a litany of hardship. The meager catch from the sullen sea, the thin soil that yielded grudging potatoes, and the long, dark nights filled with the sound of the waves, a sound like a great beast gnawing on the bones of the world. And on the far headland, where the cliffs fell away into a chaos of froth and rock, stood the cottage of Morwenna. She was the witch of the salt-stung shore, and the villagers blamed her for every ill that befell them. A stillborn lamb, Morwenna's curse. A rotted fishing net, Morwenna's spite. A child's fever, Morwenna's shadow passing over the cradle. They were not entirely wrong. Morwenna was old, so old that the memories of her own childhood were like faded paintings in a flooded gallery. Her hair was not grey, but the stark white of a sun-bleached bone, and it flowed down her back in a wild torrent. Her eyes were the color of the winter sea under a leaden sky, and they held no warmth, only a deep, patient knowledge. Her hands, though gnarled like the roots of the ancient, wind-sculpted trees that clung to the cliffs, were deft and sure. She did not cackle or ride a broomstick for childish amusement. Her magic was a quieter, more fundamental thing, woven from the sorrow of the ocean, the resilience of the stone, and the secrets whispered by the dead. Her cottage was not made of gingerbread, but of dark, sea-worn timber and stone, its roof thick with living sod and hardy, purple-flowered thyme. A crooked chimney, stained black by years of peculiar fires, puffed smoke that smelled of ozone, damp earth, and drying herbs. In her garden, no mundane vegetables grew. Instead, there were silver-leafed plants that trembled at the approach of a lie, thorny vines that produced berries blacker than a starless midnight, and a gnarled tree that bore fruit resembling human hearts, pulsing with a soft, phosphorescent light. The villagers left offerings for her on a large, flat rock at the edge of the woods, a scrawny chicken, a basket of withered turnips, a clay jar of mead, hoping to buy her indifference. They never saw her collect them, but the offerings were always gone by morning. To approach her cottage was unthinkable. It was a boundary as absolute as the cliff's edge. The story that truly defined the fear of Morwenna for the people of Greyhaven was an old one, told in hushed tones by the fire. It was about a young man named Elara, bold and foolish, who had dared to climb the headland to steal a lock of the witch's hair, believing it would make him invincible. He was found 3 days later on the stony beach, his body unmarked, but his mind utterly vacant. He would sit for hours, drooling, staring at the sea, and would only speak one phrase, over and over, in a voice that was not his own. The deep things are patient. This was the world into which Elara was born. Elara was 17, with hair the color of damp straw and eyes that were too large and too perceptive for her own good. She was an oddity in Greyhaven, a girl who preferred the company of gulls and the lonely, wind-scoured beaches to the gossip and drudgery of the village. She would watch the distant, solitary light in Morwenna's window at dusk, not with fear, but with a fierce, burning curiosity. While the other villagers crossed themselves or spat when the witch was mentioned, Elara would simply listen, her head tilted, storing every whispered detail. The crisis began, as it always did in Greyhaven, with the sea. The fishing boats returned one evening, not with the usual paltry haul, but with nothing. The nets were empty, torn in places by something with terrible strength. The next day was the same. And the next. A week passed, and the fish-smelling silence of the harbor was more terrifying than any storm. The village's already thin stores began to dwindle at an alarming rate. Despair, a colder and sharper hunger than any other, began to gnaw at their bellies. The village elder, a man named Boren whose face was a roadmap of bitterness, called a meeting in the longhouse. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and fear. "It is the witch's doing," Boren declared, his voice a dry rasp. "She has turned the fish from us. She means to starve us out." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. It was easier to blame a monster on the headland than to face the capricious, unknowable cruelty of nature. "We must appease her," a woman cried out. "A greater offering. We have nothing left to offer but our own children." Boren snapped. "No appeasement has failed. It is time for a stronger solution." His eyes, small and hard like chips of flint, scanned the terrified faces until they landed on Elara, who was standing quietly near the back. The girl, he said, pointing a bony finger. The strange one. She is unafraid. She is marked. All eyes turned to Elara. She did not flinch, but met Boren's gaze steadily. You will go, Boren commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. You will go to the witch. You will demand she lift her curse from the sea. You will not return until she does. A collective gasp filled the room. It was a death sentence, elegantly delivered. Elara's mother wept and her father hung his head in shame, but they did not protest. The needs of the village, the hydra-headed beast of collective fear, outweighed the life of one strange girl. So, with a heart that was a turbulent mix of terror and a thrilling, forbidden excitement, Elara prepared to go. She was given no weapon, no charm, only a small loaf of hard bread and a skin of water. As she walked through the village towards the path that led to the headland, the people watched her from their doorways, their faces pale and closed. They did not wish her luck. They were already mourning her as a necessary sacrifice. The path to Morwenna's cottage was not a path at all, but a treacherous goat track that wound along the edge of the crumbling cliffs. The wind tore at Elara's cloak, and the crash of the waves below was a constant, deafening roar. It took her most of the day, and by the time the crooked silhouette of the cottage came into view, the brief, gloomy twilight was deepening into night. The cottage looked even more ancient and powerful up close. The garden seemed to watch her, the strange plants turning their leaves subtly in her direction. The air hummed with a silent energy that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Gathering every shred of her courage, Elara walked to the heavy, oaken door and knocked. The sound was swallowed by the wind. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, the door swung inward without a creak, revealing a deep, firelit gloom. Enter, child of Greyhaven, a voice said from within. It was not the crone's cackle of stories, but a low, melodic voice, weathered and sharp, like sea glass. I have been expecting you. Elara stepped inside, her eyes struggling to adjust. The single room was cluttered yet orderly. Bunches of herbs hung from the low ceiling, filling the air with a complex, astringent perfume. Jars lined shelves, containing things that floated in murky liquid, eyes of unknown creatures, twisted roots, miniature storms of swirling dust. In the large fireplace, a cauldron bubbled over a low, blue flame, emitting a scent of salt and something metallic. And in a high-backed chair carved with images of leviathans and drowned cities, sat Morwenna.
The witch was more and less than the stories described. Her presence filled the room, ancient and immense, yet her form was lean, almost frail. Her white hair seemed to move with a life of its own, and her sea-coloured eyes pinned Elara where she stood, seeing through her skin and bones, down to the very core of her fear and curiosity.
They sent you to demand I lift the curse, Morwenna stated, a faint, ironic smile touching her lips. The fools. They believe my will alone can command the great, blind heart of the ocean. The fish are gone because the leviathan of the deep stirs in its sleep. Its dreams poison the water. It has nothing to do with me. Elara found her voice, though it was a thin, reedy thing. Then, can you not wake it, or soothe it? Morwenna's smile vanished. To wake it fully would be to call the waves down upon your village and grind it to splinters. To soothe it requires a price. A memory. A potent one. What memory would you offer, child? Your first kiss. The sound of your mother's voice. The feeling of sunlight on your face. Elara was silent, horrified. She had nothing of value to offer but her memories. I thought not, Morwenna said, not unkindly. The village offered you as a sacrifice, but they did not give you the tools to succeed. They gave me a vessel, empty and waiting. She rose from her chair, her movements fluid and unnervingly silent. You will not be returning to them, Elara. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. You have a choice now. You can turn and leave, and likely perish on the cliffs or return to a village that will despise you for your failure. Or you can stay. You can be of use. Use? Elara whispered.
An apprentice, Morwenna said, and the word hung in the air, thick with implication. You are not like them. I have watched you. You listen to the wind. You see the patterns in the foam. You are lonely, and loneliness is the first lesson of power.
The offer was a key turning in a lock Elara did not know existed within her soul. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but beneath it was a surge of something else. Purpose. This was the threshold of the map, the edge of the world she had always known. She could step back into the grey, predictable misery of Greyhaven, or she could step forward into the terrifying, magnificent unknown. She took a deep breath, the scent of herbs and ozone filling her lungs. I will stay. Answer. Elara's apprenticeship began. It was not a matter of learning spells from a grimoire. It was a re-education of the senses. Morwenna taught her to listen, not just to the wind, but to the different voices within it, the shriek of the gull, the sigh of the drowned, the whispered secrets carried on the spray. She learned to read the tides not as the pull of the moon, but as the breathing of the leviathan far below. She learned the language of the stones, the slow, grinding patience of the cliffs. She learned to tend the garden, The silver-leaf truth-teller plant would curl its leaves around her finger if she spoke a falsehood, its touch like ice. The heart fruit tree required her to sing through it, old, wordless melodies that made the pulsing glow brighten. Morwenna showed her how to harvest the midnight blackberries without being pricked by the thorns, which carried a sleep so deep it was a cousin to death. Elara learned the principles of magic. It was not about commanding the world, Morwenna explained, but about understanding its balances and its hungers. Every action required an equal price, a symmetry. To heal a wound, one must acknowledge the pain that caused it. To bring rain, one must honor the dryness of the earth. Magic was a transaction with the world, and the witch was the intermediary. They think we steal power, Morwenna said one evening as they prepared a poultice for a wounded seal that had washed up on the shore below. They are wrong. We borrow it. We redirect it. And we always pay the debt. The fool Alaric thought he could take my power. I simply showed him the price. His sanity, in exchange for a glimpse of what I see when I look at the sea. He found the cost too high. Weeks turned into months. Elara's hands grew calloused, but her spirit grew quieter, stronger. She felt less like a girl and more like a natural force, a piece of the cliff, the sea, the sky. She missed her family sometimes, but the thought of returning to the small, superstitious world of Greyhaven felt like trying to put a grown oak back into an acorn. Meanwhile, in the village, the situation grew more dire. The fish did not return. The people were starving, their desperation curdling into a mad fervor. Boren, his eyes burning with a fanatical light, declared that the witch had not only cursed the sea but had corrupted Elara, turning her into a familiar, a monster. The offering rock was abandoned. Now, the talk was of fire and iron. One night, a storm gathered over the sea, a true tempest of howling wind and lightning that tore at the sky like bright claws. As Elara watched from the window, she saw a different, more terrifying light, the flickering orange of torches, snaking their way up the headland path. They are coming, Morwenna said, her voice calm. She stood by the fire, not looking at the window, but into the flames. Fear has finally given him courage, or stupidity. What do we do? Elara asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. The old fear, the fear of the village, had returned.
We finished your first true lesson, Morwenna replied. She turned, and her eyes were no longer the color of the winter sea, but of the storm itself, flashing with internal lightning. They believe in a curse. Tonight, they will learn what a curse truly is, but to wield it, you must understand its cost, the symmetry.
The mob reached the cottage, a score of men led by Boren, their faces twisted by hunger and rage, their torches guttering in the wind and rain. They carried scythes, rusty swords, and axes. Witch! Boren screamed, his voice barely audible over the gale. We have come for you. Send out the girl if she still lives, and face your judgment. The door of the cottage opened. Morwenna stood there, alone, seeming to draw the storm's energy into herself. She seemed taller, her white hair a raging nimbus around her head. You speak of judgment, Boren, her voice cut through the storm, clear and terrible. But you have never understood the judge. You blame the lighthouse for the shipwreck. Your lies won't save you now, he roared. Lift the curse on the sea. There is no curse on the sea, Morwenna said. Only the Leviathan's troubled sleep. But you demand a curse. Very well, I will give you one. I will lift the veil from your eyes. I will show you the world as it truly is, and your place in it. She raised her hands to the sky. Elara, watching from the shadows inside, felt a massive surge of power flow from the witch, from the cottage, from the very cliffs. It was a torrent, ancient and cold. The price for this, Morwenna intoned, is the comfort of your ignorance. The symmetry is truth for truth. She brought her hands down, pointing at the mob. The change was not in the world, but in their perception of it. The men cried out, dropping their torches and weapons. Boren, who was at the front, let out a choked gasp. He was no longer looking at a solitary witch on a cliff. He was seeing the threads of life, the decay in the wood of his own home, the sickness in his own body, the slow, inevitable crumbling of the cliffs, the immense, sleeping presence in the deep, a shadow so vast it dwarfed the world. He saw the fragile, fleeting nature of his own existence, a single, guttering candle against an eternity of dark, indifferent cosmos. He saw the fear in the heart of every person in his village, not as an abstract, but as a tangible, rotting thing. He saw the truth, that they were insignificant, temporary, and utterly, terrifyingly alone in a universe that did not care for their prayers or their sacrifices. It was too much. His mind, built on a foundation of simple certainties and petty prejudices, shattered. He fell to his knees, clawing at his eyes, screaming not in anger, but in pure, unadulterated existential horror. The other men were similarly afflicted, some weeping, some catatonic, some running blindly and tumbling over the cliffs to be swallowed by the raging sea. In moments, the headland was silent, save for the storm and the whimpers of the broken men. Morwenna swayed, and Elara rushed to her side, catching her. The witch was pale, her form seeming thinner, almost translucent. The act had cost her dearly. "They will not trouble us again," Morwenna whispered, her voice raspy. "The ones who remain will be quieter." She looked at Elara, her stormy eyes dim. "The Leviathan, my focus was here. Its dreams grow darker. The sea will not recover. Greyhaven is doomed, not by my hand, but by the turning of the world. We must prepare." "Prepare for what?" Elara asked, supporting the old woman's weight. "To pay a different price. A greater one. To soothe the Leviathan, a true memory is needed. Not a single one, but a legacy. The memory of a place. The memory of Greyhaven itself." The storm subsided by dawn. The few men who had survived the night on the headland stumbled back to the village, broken and mute. They spoke no more of witches or curses. The name Morwenna was never uttered again. The village, already starving, now lost its will. One by one, families packed what little they had and fled inland, becoming whispers, then ghosts, in the wider world. Within a year, Greyhaven was a ghost town, its houses empty, its boats rotting on the shore. On the day the last family left, Morwenna and Elara stood on the headland, looking down at the silent village. "It is time," Morwenna said. She was still weak from the night of the storm, but her resolve was iron. "The memory of this place, its joys and its sorrows, its births and deaths, its love and its hate, that is the offering. We will gather it, and we will give it to the sea. The Leviathan will feed on it, and find peace. The sea will live again, though the people who knew it are gone." They worked for a day and a night. They did not chant or dance. They simply walked, first through the deserted village. Morwenna, with Elara's help, drew the memories from the abandoned homes like thread from a tapestry, the memory of a child's laughter in a dusty room, the memory of a wedding feast in a silent longhouse, the memory of a deathbed vigil. They gathered the echoes of 100 lives. Then they walked the cliffs and the beach, gathering the older memories, the crash of a ship from a century past, the cry of a long-extinct bird, the first footstep of the village's founder. It was a weightless, invisible harvest, but Elara could feel its immense, sorrowful weight. It was the soul of a place, pulled from the stone and the wood and the air. At the cliff's edge, where the water was deepest and darkest, Morwenna held the gathered memories in her cupped hands. She whispered to the sea, words so old they predated language. Then, she opened her hands and blew, as if scattering dandelion seeds. A sigh seemed to go through the world. The oppressive, sickly feeling that had hung over the water for months lifted. The sea, which had been a sullen grey, seemed to brighten, and the next day, the gulls returned, diving into the water. The fish had come back. The price had been paid. Greyhaven was gone, not just in fact, but in memory. It was a blank slate, a place of stone and sea, its history given to a dreaming monster. Morwenna did not recover her strength. The effort of gathering the memories, on top of the curse she had woven, had drained the last of her vitality. She took to her chair by the fire and rarely left it. "The symmetry, Elara," she said one evening, her voice a faint echo. "I have given much. Now the world claims its balance from me. My time is done. The cottage is yours. The watch is yours." Elara, who had once been a girl of straw-colored hair and 2 large eyes, was now a young woman with the sea in her gaze and the patience of stone in her heart. She knelt beside the old witch. "I am not ready." "No one ever is," Morwenna whispered. "That is what makes it power. It is always a choice to be made again, every day. The choice to stand on the edge, to see the truth, and to pay the price." She closed her eyes, and her breathing slowed, then stopped. As it did, the last of her power flowed out of her, not lost, but returning to the cottage, the cliffs, the sea. The cottage seemed to sigh, settling, accepting its new mistress. Elara buried Morwenna in her garden, under the heart fruit tree. The tree bloomed that night, its flowers glowing with a soft, silver light. Years passed. The village of Greyhaven was reclaimed by the elements, its stones covered in lichen, its wood becoming home for insects and birds. New people came, eventually. Fishermen, drawn by the abundant sea. They knew nothing of the past. They saw the cottage on the headland, with its single, steady light, and they heard the stories from the few scattered survivors of the old times, stories of a witch and her apprentice who had cursed a village into oblivion. They left offerings on a large, flat rock at the edge of the new settlement. A fat, silvery fish, a loaf of fresh bread, a jar of honey. They never saw her collect them, but the offerings were always gone by morning. And in her cottage of dark timber and stone, Elara, the new witch of the Salt-Stung shore, would sometimes look out her window at the new village below. She saw their small lives, their joys and fears, and she felt the immense, sleeping presence of the Leviathan in the deep. She tended her strange garden, listened to the wind, and maintained the balance. She was lonely, but loneliness was the first lesson of power. And she understood, now, the terrible, beautiful symmetry of it all.
If you feel a chill down your spine, don't worry. They're just standing behind you, listening with you. Thank you for daring to enter the world of fairy tales of Nim. We'll see you again next night, if you're still around.